Hello and welcome to episode 433 of the official EstablishTheRun.com podcast. My name is Adam Levitan, and I know, everyone wants to bet sports. They want to bet sports. I want to bet sports, Adam. Everyone wants to fire up the DraftKings or the FanDuel or the Caesars app and just blast. And I get it. It's fun to bet on sports. It's really easy to just fire off on something, but it's not in my nature. I physically can't do it. I can't bet negative EV stuff, and therefore, I don't bet sides and totals. I do, however, bet props because I like money and I like winning. And we know we are really, really likely to win in props, which we'll explain here today. For today's show, I'm joined by two young men who are elbow deep in projections every day. They're firing at props, part of our team working on the props product. It is Mike Leone and Mark Dankenbring. Leone, how's it going?
It's going well. Already, full in prop season as some are getting released for week one. So it's been exciting. I don't know how productive it is for the rest of my work to just be running props all day, but that's the work you're getting out of me right now, Adam.
It's the best. Mark, how's it going?
Going great. Yeah. I'm waking up, early now just to make sure I don't miss anything. We're firing off and added a new plant to the studio this year in case, Evan yells at me to go touch some grass or dirt. I just can reach right behind and touch it. Don't even have to go outside.
Just eat it. Okay. Before we get into it here today, important announcement for anyone who has not seen it yet. Our in-season player prop subscription is live on the site. I want to be clear. This is separate from our fantasy subscription this season. There's been so many people asking about this, and I get it. Everyone saw our record the last few years. We're really, really likely to beat the books up on this, but it really is a niche product, and you'll want to read the full details yourself to see if it makes sense for you. So head to the site, find the FAQ article in the props drop down, and read it very closely. Also, note this podcast is brought to you by our friends at Underdog Fantasy. They have this ridiculous $2 million to first, $1 million second place fantasy tournament running right now. Still spots available, $25 buy-in. Really is the best way to put all the knowledge you've accumulated over this summer to use. If you use promo code ETR when you sign up, they will match your first deposit up to $100. It's really an unbelievable contest. And they also have pick'em stuff during the season, which is kind of like props. And then we can hit that as well once the season gets here. All right, let's get into it here, boys. So we had this, ridiculous record last year, 216 and 118, just an absurd 64.6% win rate. Now, people are saying, oh, well, how do you do that? Why can we beat props? To me, it's not even props. It's that our projections and our projections team is so good that you don't have to be a rocket scientist to overlay our projections against the prop lines and start winning. Now, it's not that simple. There's a lot more to it, but that's the gist of it. The other thing that I would say about beating them up is that they're not like, people make fun of the books for how bad they are at posting lines or whatever. They're really not. Like, they're posting hundreds, sometimes thousands of props in a week, and we're picking off 10, 15, 20, 30 of them. I mean, that it's really hard to do what they're trying to do, post line for every single player, backups, third wide receivers, etc. So anyways, Leone, projections versus lines seems really simple. Is that how you think about props, or do you want to go deeper?
Yeah, so projections versus lines, it's not that we're necessarily even looking at a line and then figuring out if that player projects less. We're doing our projections, separate from the line so that we're not biased by what the prop line is. Now, sometimes seeing the prop line will have us double check because we want to make sure, okay, we're showing a big under here. Are we correct in our inputs, our team play calling, our target share of the player? And we'll double check that way, but it works out really well where once we do that double check, we can feel pretty confident and trying to, just think through some of the distribution stuff as well, which we'll get into later.
Yeah. And a big part of this is like, we're a fantasy football company, right? Like when we started ETR, there was no way I thought that we'd ever be betting props like this, but we take our projections so seriously. You can listen to more on that episode 431. We just have a big edge there. And like, even if props aren't for you, like I feel like winning on props just shows that like our projection, this quantitative approach that we take, we actually go out and prove it that we can win. The one thing I would say about doing projections, I know Mark is super involved on the inputs on the usage side. I mean, like we're looking at stuff such as Devontae Parker's over under receiving line And then what goes into that is, well, how much do we think Devontae Parker is going to see target share versus Jacoby Myers target share? So it all kind of goes together. I think the volume checks are good when we look at props. Mark, what do you think about doing volume and how it relates to props?
Yeah, I think essentially just our goals at ETR are different than the sportsbook, and that's why we're profitable in props, because we're focusing strictly on the player level. And, we've been tracking camp reports on New England and trying to figure out the pecking order of the wide receivers between Devontae Parker, who's a new addition this offseason, with guys like Kendrick Bourne and Nelson Aguilar, who were there last year and are kind of, more entrenched already in the offense. So it's just trying to sift through all the news, and we have a great team here. There's a lot of people giving input, which really helps and kind of removes any personal bias or, I think it's just, again, our goals and the information we're looking for is more at the micro level and player level more so than at the team level. So I think that really gives us a leg up, and then just having multiple people scour, for information all off season. That this has been, the culmination of a lot of work this whole season. I think Leone and myself did, our initial team projections back in March or April on these teams. So it's been a long time coming of tweaking and looking at information and refining our takes, to get to this point.
Well, while we're on the subject of projections versus prop lines, I think we should have a quick conversation on mean versus median. I hope anyone who bets props understands this, but there's a big difference between mean, average, and median, i.e. what is the number in the middle of a set of numbers. So I probably didn't do a great job explaining that, Leone, but how do you think about mean versus median and how it relates to props?
Yeah, the mean is if you were to take, play a game 1,000 times, how many yards would, Brandon Ayuk average those 1,000 times? It would just be a straight average. The median would be, what did he do half the time? If you found the midpoint and you found out what yardage that was, that's the median. And it generally runs under the mean, especially for players that aren't as high volume. So someone who projects for an average of 40 receiving yards, for example, their median is going to be much lower than their mean. So more times than not, we would expect them to have less than 40 yards. Think of someone like Marquez Valdes-Scantling last year. He might have averaged, 40 yards a game, but if he has one 60-yard catch in a game, all of a sudden he's over that mean. So he's going to have, 2 other games where he's at 30 and 30 and not quite get there. And that's really important. It's something that the books have started to adjust to, but so many people in the fantasy industry use mean projections that they start comparing the prop line directly to a mean projection. And as a result, sometimes you can fall into some traps if you're not thinking through the distribution of the players. And we look at different things for players as well. Average depth of target, guys with lower ADOTs are going to have a higher median relative to their mean versus guys that have really high ADOTs is going to be a bit more variant and a bit more volatile.
Exactly. And so it's really important to understand that our projections, and Leone can comment again here, our projections are mean. And so if we're showing a projection versus a line that is close on mean, chances are the median is going to be way lower. Now, as Leone said, that's not the case for everyone. Jarvis Landry's median runs close to his mean, I suspect. But as Leone said, someone like T.Y. Hilton or Deshaun Jackson or Marquez Valdes-Scantling, their median are going to be way, way, way different. So I think understanding that is really important. And again, Leone, our projections come through as mean, correct?
Yes, they're a mean projection. I will note on some of the really high volume players, it becomes a bit tighter as well. If you just think through basically the room to be different than the mean, again, like using a 30-yard example, if someone has a mean of 30, that player could have 150 yards in a game. Like, it's not out of the realm of possibility with a couple big plays. And then they're 120 off their mean on the high side. Whereas they can only go 30 yards under their mean at a 0 at 30. There's only so much room. So if you start to think how the averages work, whereas if a guy averages 100 yards a game, that dynamic starts to become closer to a normal distribution where he's going to have some games at 160 yards, might have some games at like 40 yards. So it becomes a little bit tighter there at the very high end.
Okay. Before we move on, I'm sure some people are wondering, well, if you guys are beating them up so bad on props, I'm sure there's a lot of other people beating them up out there on props. Why are the books even offer this? And like, my short answer is they have to. If you read this David Purdom article, maybe a month and a half ago, I tweeted it. I'm sure you can find it. David Purdom, the gambling writer for ESPN, he basically wrote a whole article about how the books are like overwhelmed with interest in props. And if you're not offering props as a book, you're just not going to get customers. So they have to. Do they have to offer lines on third and fourth wide receivers? I don't think they have to, but they're in competition with each other to do so. And also, I think it's almost like a marketing expense or a lost leader if people beat them up on props because they just assume everybody is going to get in there and blast on sides and totals and lose that way. I also think that generally, probably most people still lose on props, even though we think that it's soft for the same reasons they lose on everything else. They're not disciplined. They're not using a quantitative approach, et cetera. So, yeah. And also, I should add that limits on props are small. Even if you have a clean account, I mean, you're not going to be able to bet a ton on props. I guess it depends what a ton is for you relatively, but you're not going to be able to go out there and bet $2,000 on props at a time, even with a clean account. And so, it's not a huge risk to them, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
I'd also say there's heightened demand for it now too, with kind of the younger generation coming up with fantasy sports, constructing how they view sports and much more at the player level rather than just at the team level in general. Purdom in that article mentioned it's a lot of people in their 20s and 30s that are driving the volume and props, which makes a lot of sense, just tying again to fantasy and player level stuff, and it's a simpler bet, just betting on one player to go over their receiving yards rather than betting on a full game. So I was definitely worried that, us and just in general, the props market, the success of professionals would kind of make books take down the menus and not offer much. But I think, at least this article sounds like, pretty bullish on it continuing in the future, which is great.
Yeah, for sure. Props for life. Okay. If you follow us, and specifically if you follow me, you'll see that we mostly bet unders. Now, I don't want to go too far into this, but there's just so many ways that unders get there versus overs in a football game. I can think of about 6 off the top of my head why unders are better than overs. We already mentioned one, the median thing. I will say that end of last year, and I think to some degree this year already, and by the way, we've already taken 9, 10, 11 props so far for week 1. I think books are doing a better job of pricing things lower, but we need to keep them honest, and we have been keeping them honest by taking overs. If they adjust too much, we have to be willing to take some overs. So, Mark, I know you were tracking all our data last year. Why are we so much more successful on unders? Or maybe not even that. Maybe it's why are unders, generally speaking, so much better?
Yeah, I think it's just the way sports, contests play out. As you mentioned, kind of a lot of outs to get into the under, whether that's injury, game script, I think is probably the biggest factor, and that can be influenced by a lot of things. If a team is blowing someone out, then that's going to typically lead to more rushing attempts. And, if a team scores a defensive touchdown, then that removes an offensive, possession from that team, which just inherently, lowers the projected output for their receiving yards or rushing yards or things along those lines. So, there's just a lot of ways possessions can get changed in the NFL. And when we're betting on pure volume that, needs to pretty much get there over the course of a game, just so many things can happen. Injuries can take effect. Wide receiver distribution, as you were mentioning with New England, maybe Kendrick Bourne, is the wide receiver 2 or 3 over Aguilar and Devontae Parker, and we just don't know that. So betting the under on Parker, kind of turns out in our favor just because we were, had the wrong projection on, the New England wide receiver core. So there's just so many different ways that an under can hit throughout the course of a game. Whereas overs, it's just tougher to get there based on, all the different things that can happen.
Yeah, I mean, to me, it's folks have a hard time pricing in injury risk in a game. Blowouts, like just because the line is 3 or 6 doesn't mean the game's not going to blow out and turn into something really unexpected. Rotation isn't as everyone assumed, and that goes for players that everybody assumes is going to play every snap. Well, that's factored into the line, obviously, but then what happens when they start rotating a little bit more than we thought? Then it creates a situation where all the unders are good too. But yeah, if it was up to me personally, we'd only bet unders, but thankfully we have Leone and Mark and other people in there that love to take the overs. And actually, all joking aside, I joke a lot about it. But if they're going to start adjusting lines really far down because they know that people like us are betting all unders, then we're just going to have to take overs. And I think it's really good to keep them honest and let them know that we are willing to take some overs as well if they adjust too far. So I don't know. Do you want to get anything in here? Overs boy, Leone. It's so funny. Everybody in chat like knows if Leone put in a bet because it's some like total dust ball over.
We took Cam Akers over to start the season, and everybody's livid about that. I just would note that like we were still profitable on overs. We were more profitable on unders. So we're still only trying to take good overs. There's lots of them out there, but that doesn't mean they don't exist, especially as the books start to adjust. To Mark's point on game script, once in a while, game script can help an over too. It really, I think, comes down to, I think we're better than the books at projecting the range of outcomes based on the set game script setup for the week, or the way the game script has been for players based on previous weeks. And we're just kind of better at viewing that range of outcomes, which oftentimes, it does favor the underside of things. But we have tried to do a little bit more, modeling with some of our stuff, and, again, taking that mean projection and turning it into the odds of a player hitting certain statistical benchmarks, which gives us a good idea of, it lets us recognize when the books go too far, and we can be a bit more confident taking some of those overs when they do go too far, to keep them honest and to just, win on those bets straight up.
Yep. Okay. People who have been doing this for a while understand that the lines move quickly. The market is not as liquid as, say, NFL sides or totals. Lines are going to move really, really quickly. The bottom line with this is, if you win, you're going to move the market, like, period. And so if you bet at certain books, if you bet with an account that they've deemed sharp, the line's going to move. Now, we certainly are moving the lines when we bet. They move fast. They don't move instantly. You probably have 5 to 15 seconds after we bet something before the line moves. So I just want people to be aware of that. Like, if you're winning, if the books fear you, the line is going to move almost immediately, period. Like, end of story. That's just is what it is. I will say that we've been experimenting with different stuff in the chat, in Discord, with unofficials. And also, like, there's so many sharp people in the Discord chat that are sharing information and angles and bets. And there's actually like a lot of good stuff in there too. So I just wanted to put that out there on chat and Discord. One other thing I wanted to mention, some soft skills, how to manage your money and books. And so, I joked, like, through the kind of market crash in January through, I guess, almost like until a month ago or so, the safest place for your money was just keeping it on sportsbooks and betting props. It's like, Adam, what are you doing with all your money on 20 different sportsbooks? Buddy, I was prepared for the market crash, and it's an easy game. Everybody else is complaining that they're losing their 401k in the stock market. If you have it on the sportsbooks, easy game. So, like, I'm obviously joking, but I think if you're going to do this seriously, you have to always get the best line. And the way to be sure you always get the best line is to have money on literally every single book available to you. And there's multiple benefits to that. Obviously, you're always getting the best line, but at least you spread your action out. So hopefully you can keep limits longer. And when you sign up for these books, I mean, the battle for customers is so outrageous. If you're using, our bonus offers, or hopefully somebody's bonus offers, you're getting a ton of money to sign up, and you're getting the best line, and you're spreading your action out. It's just, to me, like, if you're going to do it seriously, you have to have money on every book possible. I know Mark's here in Colorado with me. We have access to an insane amount of books. Not every state is as fortunate as us, but yeah, any comments there on how to manage your money across all the books?
Definitely. I think it's crucial. Line shopping is really important for betting sides and totals, but I mean, it's like 10 times as important in props, in my opinion, just because of the sheer volume we're putting out per week. If we get 20 to 25 bets here in week one, and you have, a vig change or juice change of, let's say, plus 100 versus on one book versus minus 120 on the other, and that's very, like, prices differ on books a lot more on props than they do on sides and totals. You can easily find a line that's either 30 cents, better on one book, or even, the yards are more in your favor. And so when you're stacking that on top of 20, 25 bets a week, I mean, it adds up to hundreds of dollars that you're just, getting in free money and free EV by line shopping and having money available on different books. So yeah, I mean, myself personally, I, actively have kind of like 8 to 10 books going at a time. Just actually signed up for a new one last night that just launched in Colorado and offers props. So hoping that helps a little bit this year. But it's just so crucial, and you're just kind of getting free EV, and there's a lot of times that one book is just off market by a few yards, and that's pretty much the only place that we would bet it. So if you don't have money on that book, then you're kind of just removing yourself from the conversation immediately. So it's just so crucial, and I highly recommend to anyone to sign up for at least 3 to 4, if not more books.
Yeah, and if you go to the betting tab on our site, we do have a link to all of these sportsbook offers. It's really outrageous. Like, this is not going to last. I mean, companies cannot afford to keep paying these outrageous amounts to new players. And so, we're in a golden era to be a customer. I'll say this, Leone, I am more comfortable with the style of we're betting really big edges, and we're going to have less bets, but we're going to have a really, really, really high win rate. Now, that might not lead to the most raw dollars. In other words, would you rather go 8-2 or 160? Obviously, 8-2 has a way better win rate, but you're going to win more raw dollars going 160 or something like that. We are this year, even though it makes me uncomfortable, and I can barely sleep, we are going this year to a model which we're going to go for more volume and lower win rate. I mentioned earlier last year we were almost at 65% win rate. If I was a professional bettor doing this for my only income, I would say that's way too high. We need to bet way more games. We need to bet way thinner stuff and get down to 55, 56, 57% because we'll win more raw dollars. I hope that makes sense. And so this year we're trying to treat it as if we are professional and not just picking off 10 to 20 of the worst lines. We're going to have way more volume, and it's going to result in a lower win rate. So obviously it makes me uncomfortable to bet thinner stuff. I do think that it's right if people understand in the long run that more volume should equal more raw dollars, even if your win rate goes down. So I don't know if I explained that well, Leone, but I know you're on Team Blast, the opposite of me. So go ahead.
I'm on Team Blast, but to your point, if we are expecting a lower win rate than we did last season, you need to be more price sensitive. Last year there was a lot of room for, we would put out a prop that the line would move and people would just take it at almost any price. And we were hitting at such a high rate that those people were profitable no matter what. Whereas this year, if we're knowingly taking more bets and it becomes a little bit thinner, you need to be more price sensitive. We put out a Cooper Kupp under 7.5 catches at plus 115 on DraftKings. And if you use, a site like Unabated has an odds calculator where you type in plus 115, you see what the implied probability is. Well, plus 115 is like 46.5% implied probability. So for us to win that bet, we need Cooper Kupp to go under, 47% of the time. And we feel pretty confident in that he's going to be under at least 47% of the time. Someone in Discord, takes it at minus 122, and the implied probability there is like 55%. So like that's a huge switch. Like that's 9 points of probability that you just shifted. You went from needing him to be under 47% of the time to needing him to be under 56% of the time. That changes the dynamic of the bet a ton. So I think that's really important to keep in mind. We try to, in the Discord, give some added context when it's relevant, but it can be hard and we don't want to come off as having a false sense of precision at times, but it's really important. And then the other example I would give is sometimes we'll have stuff that's conflicting. It seems conflicting, at least on the outset, but that's because we're trying to find the best line, the best number on the person to understand the range of outcomes. We're not going to say, Cam Akers is amazing, he's going to smash just because we took over 53.5 rush receiving yards. If his carries number creeps up too high, we might take the under on the carries, even though we took the over on that. And I think people have a really tough time with that concept where they think that we're taking a stance for or against a player based on what we release. And that's really not what we're doing. We're taking a stance based on where the prop line is at. There's always going to be a set, a line set at a point which the under is good, a big middle area in which neither side is good based on the juice, and then another smaller area where the over becomes good. So there's always going to be a number where we could take any side of a bet.
Yeah, and I want to be very clear. Props is not fantasy. Like, I don't like Cam Akers this year. We still took the over. You know what I mean? Like, I don't like Cam Akers particularly in this game even. We still took the over because it's just a price number and it's a distribution bet. It's not about what we think about the guy in fantasy. I want to be really, really clear about that. Last thing I want to mention is this whole betting openers controversy. So we're trying to bet openers. In other words, we're trying to bet the lines before they move, right? When they first come out, they're going to be the softest. Then they'll get kicked into place and molded into place by efficiency by people betting. People are out there are going to bitch and say, why are you guys betting openers? You're ruining the market. The markets aren't liquid enough. These people are just self-serving because they want to bet them for themselves or be able to bet later for themselves. The truth of the matter is that the line is going to move anyways. And so if we're not betting openers, they're going to move and we're not going to have any or many bets left. So to me, it's just kind of a moot conversation and everybody's just looking out for themselves, which I totally understand. But yeah, we're going to keep betting openers and it just is what it is. Okay. Anything else we didn't touch on here you guys want to mention?
I'd say with the openers, sometimes too, we're going to try and be smart about where we think the line is going to go from when it opens, if it's going to go to more books when it opens, and just basically our goal is to give our customers the best chances to get the most amount of lines at the best numbers possible. So sometimes an opener comes in, like there was a David Montgomery line under that we took, and it was very clear to us, like this line is not going to last. We need to take this right away. And we took it. Sometimes there was stuff like the Cooper Kupp under that we took. We waited a little bit. It was on FanDuel for a while. We waited until DraftKings got the number up to where it was because we sort of foresaw that people are going to blast the over on a primetime game on a big player like Cooper Kupp, and we knew we could wait. So we're going to try and be as smart about it as possible.
Okay. That is going to do it for this discussion on my favorite market, NFL player props. If you're interested, as I said, you do need to get into the Telegram. And so please read the FAQ really, really closely before you sign up. Also, in-season package, monthly and weekly, is now live, as well as the full season. Check that out on the subscribe page as well. Showdown projections and breakdown are already up. We'll have our week 1 main slate projections up Wednesday night. For Leone, for Mark, I am Adam. Good luck, everybody.